Adolis Garcia destroyed Major League Baseball in 2023. This upcoming year, he's set to make $5.5 million. Adolis Garcia is from Cuba. In 2011, he made it to the highest level of Cuban baseball at age 18. His first season, he got paid $4 a month, and his second season, he made $38 a month. This is reportedly more than what his mom made. And we're gonna talk about the insane story behind the playoff hero for the Texas Rangers this year. So first, let's rewind it to 2016. At this point, Garcia has been playing in Cuban professional baseball for about 4 years. In 2016, he was named the Cuban Series MVP, as he led his team to the third title in 5 years. So the only way for a Cuban player to get to the highest level of baseball, which is Major League Baseball, is to somehow defect and escape Cuba. This most often happens when they go to international tournaments. With that being said, the security for the players when they're going back to Cuba is extremely strong, and it's really hard to get away from the Cuban government to send you back to Cuba. However, Cuban players actually have a treaty and allowed to go to NPB, which is the main league in Japan. Part of the treaty is that the Cuban government keeps a big chunk of the salary of the actual player. So that's what Adolis did. He went ahead and went to Japan to play for the Yomiuri Giants and actually spent most of his time in the minor leagues in Japan. And to be honest, he never really broke through the Yomiuri Giants. However, at this point, Adolis Garcia was 23 years old and slated to go back to be able to keep playing professional baseball in Cuba. He would see his friend Randy Arozarena get barred from leaving Cuba because he was so good of a player that the Cuban government was afraid that he might defect, so they just didn't let him leave. And Adolis didn't want this to happen to him. He didn't want to go back to play Cuban baseball and win more championships and be held at the standard of Randy Arozarena and not be led out of the country. So here was the plan. Adolis Garcia was gonna fly from Japan to Paris to Cuba. Everything went according to plan and he flew to Paris. However, after he lands in Paris, everything changed. Instead of catching his connection to Cuba, Adolis actually planned to get on the next flight to the Dominican Republic. Adolis knows that he only needs to live in the Dominican Republic for 6 months to become a Dominican citizen. And once he does establish his residency in the Dominican Republic, he immediately becomes an international free agent and breaks free from the chains of the Cuban government and is free to sign whatever he wants. Now, with no restrictions put upon him, he signs a $2.5 million contract with the St. Louis Cardinals. He went from making $38 a year in Cuba to making $2.5 million just by moving countries. And keep in mind, this contract is a non-rostered invitee for spring training, meaning that they didn't even know if he was going to make the team. And Adolis did not do that well in spring training. Don't get me wrong, the $2 million are still his. He still gets to keep that $2.5 million, but Adolis was just not good enough to make it to the Major League roster. So he got sent down to AA. His 84 games in AA, Adolis showed a lot of power, hitting 12 home runs and finishing with an OPS of 815. OPS is a stat used to determine the offensive contribution of a single player. Now Adolis is 24 years old, and in 2008, he gets called up to AAA, one step from the big leagues. And Adolis mashes the baseball for 22 home runs, and the big moment came for him. He gets called up to the major leagues. However, once in the major leagues, Adolis Garcia in 20 games could only collect 2 single hits, and he would be sent down back to the minors the next year. Adolis Garcia would spend his next season all in AAA, and he would hit the baseball well, again hitting for 32 home runs this year, and showing that he had more to deliver at the big league level. However, sadly, the St. Louis Cardinals did not see it this way. For the St. Louis Cardinals, Adolis Garcia was nothing more than a 4A player, a term used for players that are just above the big league level but are just under major league level. And due to this, he would get released by the St. Louis Cardinals. The Texas Rangers would come and give a chance to Adolis Garcia. It is officially the 2020 season, and Adolis Garcia was doing really good in spring training. But because of the global situation, Adolis Garcia did not make the big league roster, and there was no minor league season, so he was assigned an alternative side for him to pick up some skills, and he didn't get a chance to play at all in the big leagues in 2020. And just months later, bad news would be delivered to Adolis Garcia once again. The Texas Rangers signed former Atlanta Braves All-Star Mike Foltynewicz. So Adolis Garcia gets designated for assignment once again. Getting designated for assignment is essentially the same as getting released. The team has 7 days to trade you, 7 days to release you, and if no other team wants you, then you get sent down to the minor leagues. The difference being that you can get picked up by any other team if they think you're good enough. In Adolis Garcia's case, none of the 30 teams thought he was good enough to be in a 40-man roster. So he gets put off the 40-man and assigned to the minor leagues whenever they will have some. It is April 13th, 2021. Adolis Garcia has now been struggling to get to the big show for 10 years, and he hasn't been successful at it. His friend Randy Arozarena is already playing Major League Baseball and is lighting the world on fire. And Adolis can't even find a roster spot until this day, April 13th, 2021. Adolis Garcia's contract was selected to come up and play in the big leagues and would make his season debut and go 1 for 4. And 2 days later, he would deliver his first memorable moment for the Texas Rangers. In a tied 4 for 4 game against the Tampa Bay Rays in the feared Tropicana Field, Garcia was batting at the cleanout spot in the top of the 10th inning, and he delivered the go-ahead 2-run home run to put the Rangers on top 6-4, and ultimately ended up winning 6-4. And this was only his first Major League home run. And boy, was it a memorable one for Garcia and the Rangers. This moment helped Adolis Garcia break through the glass ceiling that they had placed on him, and the Rangers actually saw the true potential of Adolis Garcia at this point. And Garcia never looked back. Garcia this year was named for an All-Star reserve and made the All-Star rookie team. Heading into the All-Star break, he already had 22 home runs, 61 RBIs, and an OPS of 840. He would keep mashing throughout the entire season and would only land 4th on the Rookie of the Year voting. Even though he had a great rookie season though, a lot of Rangers fans were still skeptical and thinking that this first year was a fluke. Well, I can confirm that it wasn't, because he would make the All-Star game with 27 home runs in 2022. And in 2023, he would smash 39 home runs, 107 RBIs, and would get called as an All-Star once again for the second time. The Rangers finished with 90 wins, the same amount as the Astros, but lost the AL West in a tiebreaker, meaning the Texas Rangers had to fly from Seattle, Washington to play the next day in Tampa, Florida. I was lucky enough to be in the stadium those 2 games, and I can tell you, Adolis Garcia and the Texas Rangers destroyed Tropicana Field. And now we're going into Baltimore to face the Orioles, and destroyed Baltimore. And now they would go on to face the team that they lost a tiebreaker to, and it's a time for them to be able to redeem themselves. It is the American League Championship Series, and the biggest AL West rivals are fighting for that championship. In a grueling 7-game series against the Astros, Garcia showed off, hitting 5 home runs and 15 RBIs, including 4 straight games with home runs. And the Rangers were able to take the 7th game at Minute Maid Park, advancing to the World Series against the Arizona Diamondbacks. And in Game 1 of the World Series, Adolis Garcia walks it off, having one of the most iconic moments in Rangers history. And Adolis Garcia would get a World Championship ring when they would win the World Series in 5 games. The secret sauce behind Adolis Garcia's success is that he was willing to gamble on himself and then work extremely hard to be able to make that gamble pay off. And you won't believe how Mike Tyson gambled on himself. It paid off. He made a bunch of money with it, and then he lost it. So check this video out to see how that happened. And I'll see you in the next video. See ya! Ballin' now, skirt down, all of this diamond soap. Bottom for me, but they're yours now. You could drink it, but take it slow. Ballin' for you, falling for